Inbound accident past Derry Ashford. They're in the managed lanes. That's gone. Scattered showers on the radar right now. Some along the coast. 50% chance you'll get wet later. Maybe 90 for the high. 80% chance of rain tomorrow. Staying around 90, but that rain going into Thursday, bringing some cooler temperatures. 50-50 shot of rain Thursday. 85 for the high. Then sunshine Friday and Saturday. We're going to remain in the mid to upper 80s, so it's going to be nice. Coming up 79 right now.
Support comes from Houston Grand Opera, presenting their 25-26 season, including the first ever presentations of Puccini's Il Trittico, Silent Night, and Robert Wilson's fantasy production of Messiah. Season subscriptions and more at hgo.org.
Listen anywhere. We're streaming live online. It's KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. 9 o'clock.
Like it or not, here in Greater Houston, we all spend a ton of time on the road. Chances are you've got some thoughts about how those roads here work or don't. I'm Michael Haggerty, in for Craig Cohen, and today on Houston Matters, if you had a magic wand, how would you redesign or change a particular road, thoroughfare, or freeway in the city? Share your thoughts now with a call or a text to 713-440-8870, email talk@houstonmatters.org, or comment on our live stream on YouTube.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
Also this hour, the untold history of lethal injection and how it's carried out. And writer Sasha Bonet reflects on how Houston and the women who raised her shaped her life. She's got a new memoir called The Waterbearers. We'll start, though, with a news update from NPR and News 88.7. Stay with us.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump says he's canceling a meeting this week with top congressional Democrats. Writing online last hour, Trump says it wouldn't be productive. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries said this morning they had agreed to meet this week. They're trying to reach an agreement on a federal government spending plan. If Congress does not pass a spending agreement, the federal government will shut down next week. Democrats have been demanding that Republicans rescind enormous cuts in federal health care programs before they'll support a spending plan. Today, Trump called these demands unserious and ridiculous. Trump has now arrived at the United Nations in New York City, where the General Assembly is opened. The first speaker was Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He immediately called out the catastrophic wars around the world. Guterres zeroed in on the war in Gaza. He noted it was launched by Hamas, and he called out Israel for the tens of thousands of Palestinian deaths.
Nothing can justify the horrific Hamas terror attacks of October 7 and the taking of hostages, both of which I have repeatedly condemned. And nothing can justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people and the systematic destruction of Gaza.
The Secretary General repeated his demand that all hostages be released and that Israel and Hamas immediately agree to a ceasefire. President Trump is scheduled to address the delegates later this morning. The U.S. Secret Service says it has discovered a significant hoard of communication equipment in the New York region. It's enough to cripple phone systems and interrupt emergency response communication. It could also have interfered with the UN General Assembly events this week. The Secret Service says the equipment could be used to interrupt emergency response communication and other links. The cache of equipment included 100,000 SIM phone cards. Stocks opened mixed this morning as Boeing scouts for new business. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose about 280 points in early trading.
Boeing shares got a lift from news that Uzbekistan Airways plans to buy nearly 24 Dreamliners. Investors are also hoping Boeing could be close to inking a deal with China for a large number of U.S.-made jets. Jaguar Land Rover says its auto assembly lines in the U.K. will remain shut down for at least another week as the company tries to recover from a cyber attack. More than 30,000 auto workers have been idled by the attack since the end of last month. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell speaks about the nation's economic outlook in Rhode Island this afternoon. His remarks come after the central bank cut its benchmark interest rate last week for the first time in 9 months. Asian stocks were mixed overnight. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
On Wall Street, the Dow is now up about 260 points. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Eric and Wendy Schmidt through the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all. On the web at theschmidt.org. This is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harrib. New this morning, Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez says some of his deputies were lucky earlier while responding to a call in Atascocita. Gonzalez says they were ambushed by a man with an automatic rifle hiding out in a wooded area where the call for service came from. Sheriff Gonzalez says that Kenyon Coleman was waiting for deputies, and when they arrived, he opened fire. Nobody was injured. Sheriff Gonzalez says that the suspect's weapon may have jammed, which possibly prevented a more tragic situation. Gonzalez says the initial call for service was likely fake. Coleman was wearing all black clothing, and Gonzalez says he had a chair set up, equipped with a rifle and large amounts of ammunition. He's been booked in the Harris County Jail, charged with aggravated assaults. Governor Greg Abbott signed Texas's first private school voucher program into law last May. It's set to go into effect for the 2026-2027 school year. As the enrollment period approaches, acting Texas Comptroller Kelly Hancock visited the Imani School in Houston to answer questions about the program's rollout. News 88.7's Grayson Bobian has more.
The $1 billion appropriated by the Texas legislature will be distributed via education savings accounts, or ESAs. The allocation of funds will follow a tiered structure, prioritizing families with children with disabilities or making less than 200% of the federal poverty line. Qualifying families are expected to receive around $11,000. According to Comptroller Hancock, families will be able to direct funds from their ESA to a private school of their choice using an online marketplace that will be available in January.
The best way, we've talked about it before, is kind of like an Amazon with a list of schools. Ideally, it'll be very similar to any other transaction that they do online.
Future updates about the program can be found at texas.controller.gov. I'm Grayson Bobian, News 88.7.
Hundreds of University of Houston students gathered yesterday to mourn the loss of a 20-year-old woman who was found dead in the Brays Bayou last week. Jade McKissick, who also went by Sage, was reported missing back on September 11th and was pulled from the water 4 days later. Kayla Walker was among those honoring her memory.
I really hate that this had to happen to her. If anybody did, it shouldn't have been her. Nobody deserves to go out like that. May she rest in peace. She was a wonderful community member and a wonderful friend.
Houston police have said they do not suspect foul play in her death, and the medical examiner is still conducting an autopsy. I'm Matt Harrib, News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty, in today for Craig Cohen. Good morning. Coming up this hour, what studies on the bodies of the executed can tell us about capital punishment and other revelations from a new book. Also, how the women in her life and Houston's bayous and black neighborhoods shaped writer Sasha Bonet, whose new memoir is called The Waterbearers and is out now. But first, one of the facts we all live with here in Houston is spending a lot of time on the road, probably in a car, but also maybe on a bike or even on foot. Whatever way you encounter our roads and freeways, though, chances are you've got some thoughts about how they work or don't. And so today we're revisiting a conversation we had a little over a year ago, asking this question. If you had a magic wand, or maybe just a ton of money and time, how would you redesign or change a particular Houston road or freeway or interchange in our city? Share your thoughts and join our conversation now with a call or text to 713-440-8870, or you can email us at talk@houstonmatters.org or comment on our live stream on the Houston Public Media YouTube channel. Joining us with some of their own thoughts on the matter are some people with an interest in transportation and road design themselves. Joe Cutrufo is the Executive Director of BikeHouston. Mandi Chapa is a lecturer at the Rice University School of Architecture, I should say. And Jennifer Hadayia is the Executive Director of Air Alliance Houston. Good morning to you all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad to have you. And so, Mandi, I'll start with you since you're someone who thinks about design and architecture. I mean, briefly, what kind of comes to mind for you about how you might redesign either a particular road or roads in general here in Houston?
Thank you. Well, how I would approach that would be, first of all, in an area, what does the area have to offer? What are the destinations around there? Would you feel safe taking that route? Is there a route to get to through that? And then is the walk there, drive there, bike trip there interesting. I would take on Memorial Drive from Shepherd to Memorial Park because I feel like there's a lot of residents around there needing to get there in various ways, and we want people to get to parks on foot and on bikes. And it is a six-lane street with sometimes a turn lane, and so if you're going to the park, you're needing to cross 7 lanes of traffic. So that's what I would take on.
One time stuck in traffic there, a cyclist trying to cross the street lost control and ran into the side of my vehicle. So and she was okay, thankfully, but it's like, wow, okay, obviously you got to maybe some more ways to cross that busy thoroughfare would be good. Joe, you're a cycling advocate. I imagine where some of your thinking might lie on some of this, but I mean, what's some of the things that come to mind, the first things when you think about, man, we need to redesign this?
I think before we can dream big about redesigning full streets, we need to think about the truth on the ground right now. 2 years ago, we had lots of street transformations already in the works. And most of those street transformations have been canceled, or Mayor Whitmire has forced them to be redesigned. And that's not free. That costs hundreds of thousands of dollars every time you want to redesign a street. Projects that had broad community support, projects that were fully funded, fully designed, have been forced to be redesigned. Montrose Boulevard, maybe the most famous example now. Antoine Drive, Telephone Road now, forced to be redesigned. And these redesigns are not being done with best practices in safety and traffic engineering. They're being done to suit the personal preferences of the mayor. So there are a lot of ideas, and I'm sure our callers have a lot of ideas, and I've got a few myself, but I think before we really dream big, we've got to think about what's actually happened in the last couple of years on our streets.
Jen, what do you think first? I mean, you're an environmental person, but I mean, what comes to mind for you?
What comes to mind for me first is similar to my colleagues, and that is looking at this question from a macro perspective. I would propose that we have to redesign our entire approach to roadway infrastructure. The reality is we are in severe non-attainment for ozone pollution in Houston. We are in non-attainment for particulate matter pollution, and we are on the front lines of human-caused climate change in the Houston area. All of these things have a nexus with transportation. Put simply, they all overlap with tailpipe pollution. So if we are going to get serious about reducing air pollution in the Houston area, we have to get serious about how overbuilt our roads, freeways, and highways are. A wise actor once said, if you build it, they will come. And there is no statement more true about roads, freeways, and highways. When you overbuild your highways, you have more single occupancy vehicles on the road. It's a concept called induced demand. It has been proven time and time again in cities like Houston and across the country. So if we are serious about improving our air quality, we have to approach our roadways, freeways, highways from a perspective that reduces true vehicle miles traveled and transitions into alternatives like mode shift, like mass public transit, like mass electrification. So my view on roadway redesign starts at the top. It starts with policy. It starts with approach. It starts with a design that says we want Houston to be a healthy place to live, and to achieve that, we need less tailpipe pollution on the road.
So you build other things and they will come, you're saying as
yes.
well.
Yes.
As well. Joe, you said you had some specific ideas. Mandi mentioned tweaking Memorial there. What's one of your ideas?
You know, you probably expect me to name some street where we could put in some really good bike lanes or something like that. And, you know, I think that that's a need across the city. You know, we had the beginnings of a comprehensive bike network in Houston. You can't expect people to use bikes for transportation if the existing bike lanes don't connect to one another, if they don't connect to trails and that sort of thing. But honestly, I think the first thing that came to mind when I got the question, you know, if you could wave a magic wand, I think I would take all of the streets in downtown and midtown and change them from one-way to two-way.
Yeah. And why?
Well, it's about safety, it's about access, and it's about economic development. When you have one-way 4 to 5 to 6 lane streets running through an urban area, you're just giving cars a way to get through that space quickly, as opposed to stopping and spending money in those places. You walk around downtown and midtown Houston, you see a lot of blank walls. You see a lot of vacant lots. You don't see a lot of storefronts. You don't see a lot of restaurants and things like that. Yeah, that's changing slowly but surely. But I think having two-way streets throughout, there's research that backs this up, but having two-way streets throughout is better for circulation and better for staying downtown, spending money downtown, as opposed to just getting in and out.
We're talking about how to redesign roads in Greater Houston and asking for your input on this. You can call or text 713-440-8870 or email us talk@houstonmatters.org. Some comments we've had so far. Fritz says they've got to fix the interchange on I-45 downtown. The single-lane ramps always cause backups because people can't merge into a single file. I regularly waste 10 to 15 minutes going through that every time. And Billy said something similar. He's not a fan of the I-45 north and south exits coming from 59 south by the George R. Brown Convention Center. Quinn says he thinks we need rail to connect the cities within 75 miles of Houston to our airport. This could take 150,000 vehicles off the road daily. Another thought from Kurt. He said, I'd add a dedicated southbound access from the NASA bypass to I-45 south. There's a ramp to go north, but to go south, you need to go through a couple traffic lights and then under the highway, then enter I-45 from the feeder road. I'm not sure what the value of the northbound ramp is. All the growth and much of the traffic on this end of town is south of NASA, but they only built a ramp to go north. Let's go ahead and take a caller. We've got Jonathan here in Houston who's with us. Jonathan, what would you change or redesign about a particular road in the city?
Yes, sir. Part of it, I would try to incorporate, I know this maybe not such a redesign, but maybe I've noticed some of the underpasses of our freeways have over the years, the trash has gotten worse in terms of just plastic, debris, et cetera, which gets filtered into our bayous and oceans. And, of course, with the whole microplastic debate and so forth going on. And so I would just try to incorporate the design where, I don't know, if maybe putting planters out there with flowers. I've seen some in the nicer neighborhoods have that. Or even some trash cans, commercials type that blend in. It's just, I grew up here. I've never seen, like you said, when you drive home today, any of your callers, just take a look when you're driving home under these underpasses or these freeways. I think the mayor needs to probably send more trucks to clean it up or whatever those as well. But just maintaining, let's start there. If we can't fix it, can we at least maintain it and make it look nice and prevent this debris and trash?
All right. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, if you spend time on the roads, and of course we get bogged down and slow down in traffic, you can start looking around. You see the trash and everything collecting. We're discussing how we'd redesign Houston roads and highways if we had a magic wand and had our way to do that. Just ahead, more of your thoughts and ideas, which you can share now at 713-440-8870 or talk@houstonmatters.org as Houston Matters continues.
With federal funding cuts, Houston Public Media has lost $2.2 million annually. In response, we have launched the Resiliency Fund, an urgent initiative to protect the programs and services you rely on. That includes PBS Kids, that provides free educational programming to children and families across Greater Houston. Your support of the Resiliency Fund helps keep this vital service accessible to our community. Give now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Medical discovery.
Support comes from Central Market's Passport Germany, featuring a store-wide celebration of German food, such as Cambozola cheese, handmade sausages, soft pretzels, and more. September 10th through 23rd, centralmarket.com.
We get support from members like you and from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, workers' compensation provider striving to build trust with businesses across the state through dedicated services. More at texasmutual.com/TexansDeliver.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty, in today for Craig Cohen. We're seeking your ideas for how you'd redesign a particular road or highway or interchange here in Greater Houston with the help of Jennifer Hadayia of Air Alliance Houston, Mandi Chapa, a lecturer at the Rice University School of Architecture, and Joe Cutrufo of BikeHouston. You can join the conversation now with a call or text to 713-440-8870, or you can email talk@houstonmatters.org. Mandi, you were saying during the break the comment about the underpasses offer some opportunity, but also some challenges.
That is right. I think that the freeways have divided communities, and there is an important thing to do there in terms of design and how we can do that. While it is hard to upkeep plants because of watering and the lack of sun, we can incorporate lighting. Through lighting, we can incorporate art. We can support our artists and bring them in. It is not a place that we would want to linger and hang out and gather, but it is a place that we want to get through safely, feel safely, with improved crosswalks, art, and light. I think it can be done.
Yeah, I've thought about that often as when I'm slowly grinding through slow traffic of how to beautify all that cement and all that, kind of urban blight that the freeways create. Interesting challenge there. Want to get to some more callers here while we have time. Let's go now to Sam here in Houston. Sam, what is your thought about a road to redesign or change?
Hello. I would redesign the tollways, let's say 288 north-south, I-10. Get rid of that, incorporate rails. You would put transit stops like at medical center, any areas where, there's high traffic.
All right. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Some more people wanting more rail opportunity. Any follow-ups, thoughts on that?
I mean, people want options. It's pretty clear. We've had at least 2 people call and say they want an alternative to being stuck in a car all the time. And this is Houston, right? We are known for highways. We're known for big trucks. We're known for asphalt. But Houstonians, just like people everywhere else in this country, they're yearning for some other way to get around so they don't have to be driving all the time.
We had an email from Nicholas who said he would love to see light rail replace the park and ride system that we have right now. I think light rail should be used instead of HOV lanes, and by that I mean literally let's lay down tracks in the space where the HOV lanes are right now.
That's a personal theory of mine. I think we have so many overbuilt lanes of concrete that could be transformed into rail. I think the infrastructure is there. We simply need the political will to invest in rail versus investing in double-decker freeways and freeway expansions. It's a theory. Other large cities are exploring this. Can we convert those lanes away from single occupancy vehicles into mass public transit?
Let's go to Ash now from the north side. Ash, what is your thought on this subject?
Good morning. Love the conversation as always. I feel like this city needs to move towards permeable surfaces and low-speed roads. And what that means is crushed granite or crushed gravel in parking lots or driveways to eliminate the standing water in streets during torrential rainstorms. And we could keep the traffic moving if people weren't worried about driving through giant puddles. It's not directly related to the roads, but I think it could have a huge impact on the way that traffic moves through the city.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Some other comments we've gotten, some other emails. Jesse said Houston should turn 249 between I-45 and Beltway 8 into a tollway. This would help alleviate traffic on 45 going north. Let's see. Yasmin said, I would put cameras back up to stop people from running red lights and stop signs. It's completely gotten out of hand. I have teenagers beginning to drive and constantly worried about what would happen to them.
Amen.
The caller who didn't want to be on the air but said that from 290 and the 610 area, we need to make I-10 a double-decked freeway. So even it sounds. I think I've heard that would be very expensive, but and is more freeway. So that maybe some of our guests take issue with that. Obviously, we don't have magic wands. Some final thoughts here. I mean, are any of these ideas things that could actually maybe happen in the relative near term, Jen?
I'd love to talk about the double-decker freeway very briefly. We have conducted models on proposed elevation of major highways, and the implications for air quality and public health are very clear. Those are more lanes. It adds more pollution. It also further divides communities, and that has an impact negatively on our air quality as well as related health outcomes such as unhealthy weight, respiratory conditions, and cardiac conditions. I agree with Joe. There are other alternatives to simply implementing the status quo. We are in a status quo mindset, which says we have a little traffic, we need to add another lane. We know time and time again the Katy Freeway expansion is our best local example that when you create the largest freeway on the planet visible from space, you don't get less congestion. Instead, you get more pollution. We need to change the mindset so that we're thinking about alternatives to this community. We are going to see population growth. We are going to see changes. We are already seeing that in survey after survey. People want options to being in their vehicles. It can improve quality of life. It can improve air pollution. And I think it's what Houstonians are demanding. So I think we need a shift in our mindset. We have to get out of status quo thinking.
Well, if we didn't get to your suggestion of how to rebuild a road here in Houston, we welcome it at talk@houstonmatters.org. Mandi Chapa is a lecturer at Rice University in their School of Architecture. Jen Hadayia is the Executive Director of Airlines Houston. And Joe Cutrufo is the Executive Director of BikeHouston. Thank you all for your time and your ideas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Still to come, what studies on the bodies of the executed can tell us about capital punishment and other revelations from a new book as Houston Matters continues.
Federal funding for public media has been cut. In response, we're creating Houston Public Media's Resiliency Fund. Donations made toward the fund will directly counter the loss of the $2.2 million in federal funds that were cut annually and strengthen our station's foundation to provide our services into the future. Contributing to this fund is easy and quick and makes all the difference to our station. Help build the Resiliency Fund now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Houston, home to Dr. Ramesha Papana and the Fetal Center team, who pioneered a prenatal patch to help babies with spina bifida walk earlier and better. More at uth.edu/manyfaces.
Support comes from Texas Fine Craft Show, featuring a collection of fine crafts from artists across the nation. September 26th through 28th at the Woodlands Waterway Marriott Hotel. Information and tickets at thewoodlandsartscouncil.org.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty, and today for Craig Cohen. Since returning to the White House this year, President Donald Trump has signed a slew of executive orders, and among them was one calling to restore the federal death penalty and instructing the Attorney General to, quote, pursue the death penalty for all crimes of a severity demanding its use. Meanwhile, states like Texas, of course, continue the practice of capital punishment, although the number of executions our state carries out each year has declined. Since 1982, Texas has used the method of lethal injection to carry out such executions, and that method, of course, has become standard practice for states across the country in the modern era. Legal scholar and former criminal prosecutor Corinna Lain of the University of Richmond School of Law says that, on its surface, lethal injection seems like a carefully conducted, well-regulated, and humane way to end someone's life. But in her new book, which is the culmination of 7 years of research on the history and process of lethal injection and how it sometimes goes wrong, Lain aims to pull back the curtain on something she says states have sought to sanitize and hide. The book's called Secrets of the Killing State, The Untold Story of Lethal Injection, and she and I will discuss the book at an event this Friday night at 6:30 at Brazos Bookstore. When I spoke with Lain earlier this year, she told me her deep dive into the subject started with a simple question.
Why can't states get this right? Why is lethal injection so problematic? We know how to put down pets. We do it by the thousands every day. We know how physician-assisted suicide works. So why are states so breathtakingly bad at using drugs to humanely end life here?
I want to get into in a minute what you're talking about of the ways that states can get this process wrong. But first, let's take a step back from there and just talk about what the public perception is of what lethal injection is like. What does that perception in the public tend to be?
The public tends to think that lethal injection is kind of like putting down a beloved pet. I myself thought that. I really did. And I'm a death penalty expert. And I had this perception that it was something like what we do with pets. And it's nothing like that.
So how is it different?
Well, it's different in a number of ways. But one of the ways that most surprised me is I thought that lethal injection had science behind it. It's not like some guy just made it up off the top of his head. But alas, That is exactly what happened. Some guy made it up off the top of his head and didn't use the same drugs, by the way, that we use in animal euthanasia. Some states, like Texas, do now, although even those drugs are different because they're compounded. But lethal injection came from the medical examiner of the state of Oklahoma, and he later referred to himself as an expert in dead bodies, but not in how to get them that way. And he dictated what he thought would be a way to kill with drugs. And he was later interviewed about it. And he said, well, I didn't do any research. I just said what I thought would work from being under anesthesia myself. And so that was the first of a long series of surprises for me about how lethal injection works.
Where did you go to research all this? What were you digging into? How did you, find out? What did you get into in all this?
Well, it was 7 years of deep research. So it was a 360 review. I really wanted to get my head around how this works and all of the different issues involved, all of the different aspects involved with it. Not all of those made it into the book. But, lethal injection is in some ways kind of like a spider web. It has all of these different separate issues, but they're all connected and they all exacerbate the other problems in these sort of unexpected ways. So I rely very heavily on investigative journalism. And, shout out to the investigative journalists that are doing this work. They are the heroes in my story. And, they've been telling these stories for a very long time. But, no one has put them all together. And along with that, I read over 150 medical journal articles because I wanted to understand, the medical side of lethal injection. And when I couldn't understand the articles, I read the studies behind them. And when I couldn't understand those, I read the pharmacology textbooks and the anesthesiology textbooks. And so my reading went pretty deep there. I didn't understand before, why can't they access the veins? Why is that so hard? I mean, people are accessing veins all the time. And I also saw this in judicial opinions and commentary. People saying, oh, that's ridiculous, that this is so hard. And so I dug into that and come to find out it's not just a matter of competence, although that's a piece of the story. It's also the fact that these people, the demographic of death row, have notoriously bad veins, and they are aging, ailing, often former drug users. And so their veins are not particularly strong in the first place. And then, assuming you can even access the vein, we are injecting a massive overdose into that vein. And so the veins are collapsing. You've got all kinds of conditions where the catheter pulls out or goes through the vein or pulls out of the vein, and the drugs get spilled into the tissue and things happen. I mean, it's just a hot mess. But, understanding all that, and then I got into the medical ethics. Well, why aren't doctors doing it? And then I had to get into that stuff. And another surprise was I thought it was doctors pushing the syringes. It's not. It's non-medical prison guards pushing the syringes from another room with 7 feet of tubing, which would never be used in the clinical setting. And so, there's all of these factors that are coming in at one time with lethal injection.
And you answered some of this in this question, but I mean, what do we know about the medical procedure and versus how we think it's being carried out, and what may be going wrong with how it's carried out, or what's different than our common perception of the being put to sleep gently?
People think that lethal injection is this very clean, antiseptic, carefully regulated procedure being done by medical professionals. It is anything but. But if you think about it, it makes sense that people would think that way. I used to think that way. I mean, they're wearing white coats. They're placing the person on a gurney. They are wiping the arm with alcohol before injecting the needle that will kill the person. So there's so much stagecraft around lethal injection to create an impression of this carefully conducted and regulated procedure, when in fact, the medical community is saying, do not call this a medical procedure at all. This is not a medical procedure. It is not medical professionals that are doing it. It is a warped version of a medical procedure. If you were doing a massive dose of drugs, you would ordinarily do it through a drip so that it didn't kill the person, right? But your goal here is to kill the person. So there's all of these things that we assume comes with just the procedure of lethal injection that we think of as medical, but it's really a Frankenstein version of the medical procedure. It retains all of the delicacies and need for exactness and care of a medical procedure, but it is warped to suit the execution setting. And that adds, a lot of error to it. And so it's this exceedingly delicate procedure that is also exceedingly error prone.
And imagine, just by, in fairness, I guess just the very nature of this procedure is so different than any medical procedure, because the first rule of medicine is do no harm. And in this case, this is the one and only instance in our society where it's permitted to, hey, the outset of this, the goal of this is to kill someone, to end someone's life. So I guess it would be safe to say that expectedly some aspects of it would be very atypical than, I guess, a normal medical procedure.
Yes. And what's interesting to me is that mapping out the history, because I am a legal historian after all. And so looking back at it, the states knew when they adopted lethal injection that the medical profession was against it, that the medical profession was not going to help. And so I document that in the book. But, lethal injection was studied way back in the 1880s. There was a report out of New York that ended up recommending the electric chair. And they explicitly mentioned, well, what about a death by drugs? And they said, no, don't do it. The entire medical profession is against this, and you're going to need the medical profession's involvement if you're going to do this right. So there was opposition from the medical profession to lethal injection decades and decades before lethal injection was even invented.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty. I'm talking with Corinna Lain. She's a law professor at the University of Richmond Law School and the author of Secrets of the Killing State, The Untold Story of Lethal Injection. So this is unlike so many other medical procedures that get adopted into common use, or a drug that gets brought onto the market. It wasn't peer-reviewed by medical professionals and double-blind tested and all those sorts of things. How did that medical examiner who came up with the idea, as you say, off the top of his head in Oklahoma, how did that become so widely adopted across the country then? I mean, I imagine there are different variations on that now, but I mean, how did that become the common practice?
Yeah, he was later asked about that because, as it turns out, so Jay Chapman has this initial 3-drug protocol, and all of the other states just start copying it. And at one of the first serious litigation over lethal injection, which wasn't until 15 years after states started adopting it, but in that litigation, people brought out, what did other states do? Did anyone ever look at this? And the answer was no. And so this initial trial court, who had looked at all of these documents, said, my sense is that other states simply fell into line. They didn't do any research either. And a number of the wardens and other prison officials from other states said, either I didn't know what drugs to use, I didn't know how to do this, all I knew was to follow them, or they said, well, I assumed somebody had done it, so we just had to copy it. And when Jay Chapman was later asked about that, he said, I guess they just blindly followed it. Never in my wildest flight of fancy would I have imagined that it would turn into what it was. He said, I was young at the time. I thought it was just going to be a thing for Oklahoma. But instead, that 3-drug protocol, which all the states unthinkingly followed, that was unthinkingly devised in the first place, was the 3-drug protocol for the first 35 years of lethal injection.
So the drug protocol for doing lethal injection, I mean, what are some examples of how that procedure has gone wrong or can go wrong, as opposed to how we think of it as this serene, peaceful way to die?
People think about lethal injection like it's someone just drifting off to forever sleep. But it's, in fact, nothing like that. The original 3-drug protocol used a paralytic, and that paralytic was also a muscle relaxant. And so the way lethal injection worked, and I mean, this is for the first 35 years of lethal injection, was the muscle relaxant would first relax the muscles in the face and elsewhere, and then freeze them that way. And so no matter what was happening inside, that person had the serene, peaceful look as though they were falling asleep. But that's purely a chemical facade. That wasn't actually what's happening, as we're now seeing.
What are we seeing now as to show that that's not the case then?
Well, there have been several studies of autopsies of executions by lethal injection. There was one that NPR reported in 2020. It was a study of over 200 execution autopsies, all by lethal injection, across all of the states and all of the protocols. And of that study, what they found was that 84% of the prisoners died while suffering from acute pulmonary edema. Now, people get pulmonary edema like all the time. That is when fluid seeps into your lungs. But acute pulmonary edema is when this process happens in seconds and minutes rather than hours, days, weeks. And the result of that is that what we're now seeing is that these prisoners are drowning in their own fluids, even as they look as though they're dying peaceful deaths. Now, all of the states use different protocols, and so some states still use the paralytic. Texas does not. Texas uses a 1-drug protocol, but that same 84% was true of the single shot of pentobarbital, which is exactly what Texas uses. So Texas is not exempt from that.
So with all this out there, and maybe not all of it common knowledge necessarily, I imagine there are some calls by some for changes in how lethal injection is carried out. How might this procedure change in the future, or could it?
It's a great question. I don't make the argument, that lethal injection can't be fixed. I'm a researcher. I'm going to lay it all out for you. And, I'm not going to shove anything down your throat. You read it and you think about whether lethal injection can be fixed. But, some of these problems with lethal injection are endemic to the execution enterprise. You're not going to be able to get great medical professionals. You're not going to have some anesthesiologist come in and, use all the same equipment and all of that because you have that Hippocratic oath. You're not going to be able to get the manufactured drugs. Every single drug manufacturer that manufactures drugs used in lethal injection has put end user agreements on it. That's just inherent in the project of using drugs to kill. They legitimately do not want drugs that they created for therapeutic uses to be used to kill. And if you think about some of their mottos, like life is our life's work. Well, that could be a little awkward, right? If someone's using their drugs to cause people to promptly die. So some of these problems are inherent. So my question at the end of this project was, why have states stuck with it so long? It's so hard. It's pushing a huge boulder uphill. It's expensive and it's not even humane. So it's not even the benefit that they say they're getting from it. So why have they stuck with it so long? And I've become convinced that lethal injection does only one thing well, and it does it very well and uniquely well. And that is, it hides the violence of state killing. The thing it does well is make it look like we are putting down a beloved pet. And if you look at death penalty support in this country, those who support the death penalty generally support it in the abstract. Lethal injection keeps the death penalty abstract. It allows the political uses to flourish while burying the brutality that executions entail.
Corinna Lain talking with me earlier this year. She's a law professor and death penalty expert at the University of Richmond Law School. Her book is called Secrets of the Killing State, The Untold Story of Lethal Injection. She and I will discuss the book at an event this Friday evening at 6:30 at Brazos Bookstore. There's a link to more information in today's post at HoustonMatters.org. Still to come, how the women in her life and Houston's bayous and black neighborhoods all shaped the life of writer Sasha Bonet and her acclaimed new memoir, The Waterbearers. Just ahead as Houston Matters continues.
Hello, I'm Josh Adams, General Manager of Houston Public Media. This station just lost $2.2 million in federal support annually. To keep our station strong, we've launched the Resiliency Fund, powered by community members just like you. Your support will help bridge the funding gap and ensure these programs remain free and accessible to everyone. If public media and this station matter to you, now is the time to act. Support the Resiliency Fund today at HoustonPublicMedia.org/donate.
Legacy of black womanhood across 3 generations of her family. Through lyrical prose and raw storytelling, Bonet reflects on what it means to carry history as a daughter, as a mother, and as a witness. Set partly in Houston's Acres Home neighborhood, where her grandmother Betty Jean settled after migrating from Louisiana, The Waterbearers explores how the lives of black women are shaped by inheritance, silence, memory, and transformation. It's a deeply personal story that also echoes the broader struggles and triumphs of black families across the South. Bonet recently spoke with Houston Matters producer Laura Walker about the power of storytelling, the influence of Houston's landscape and culture, and what it means to break cycles while still honoring the women who came before you.
When I think about Waterbearers, Women are typically the ones who bring the water to the village. It's kind of an international. So the water is what we need to survive. And so when I think about Waterbearers, I wanted to kind of express how essential these women are, not just for my family, but for the nation, for America, for the founding of this nation. So it's the ones who kind of break their backs carrying what we need to the village.
And, your work is a memoir. It blends cultural criticism and history. How does the Waterbearers weave those threads together, and why was water the perfect way to do that?
I'm from Houston, and I think people just don't. I live in New York. People don't realize Houston is a water city. People think that we're landlocked. And so I felt like the water provides something for us, like it talks to us from the past. And so I wanted to speak to the past and speak to my family's experience. And I felt that the water was kind of the perfect way to go in and out of that and kind of flow into the past and to the present. And it made it really easy to transition from not just the women in my family, but the women of the cultural history of the United States, like Betty Davis, Nina Simone, and allow for a kind of continuity between my family in Houston and then the women of the country.
This is a memoir not just about yourself, but your entire matriarchal side of the family. And your grandmother, Betty Jean, gave you permission to tell her story. How did the rest of the family feel about their story being told?
That's such a good question. I think with my grandmother being our matriarch, when she gives the signal, everyone else kind of has to follow. Of course, people didn't have to speak to me, But once one person speaks, then the other person feels like my aunts felt like, okay, I need to contribute my perspective. And even though we have this, I think within the Black culture of America, we have this way that privacy and secrecy is such a part of survival. And it always has been. And so the idea of telling the family business in a book was really hard for everyone to accept. But what was also interesting is that it felt like everyone also wanted someone to ask them who they are and where they come from and what their feelings are. So it was it's still today. I mean, the book isn't out yet, but it's still today something that we're struggling with.
You've written this memoir with such a strong sense of place and identity. How did growing up in Houston influence those themes that you explore in the book?
Leaving Houston allowed me to be more aware of Houston. That makes sense. I was able to reflect in a way. And it's just in you, when I meet people from Houston all over the world, it's something that's in you. And I was trying to figure that out. I was like, what is it about us? What exactly is it about this culture in this city? And it's so specific. And I really believe the water has a lot to do with that. And also just all of the cultures blending. And my family's come from Louisiana, and so many people here in Houston come from Louisiana. But I felt like I was trying to understand myself. And in order to understand myself, I had to try to understand what was going on here in Houston. What was it that had kind of seeped into me? And there's just so much richness to this city. And there's so much, I learned a lot also in the research and just the music that was developed here. I always thought, and this may be controversial, but I always thought Zydeco came from Louisiana, but apparently it came from Fifth Ward, and it was developed by people from Louisiana here in Houston. And also just the blues of Houston, the Bayou City blues, and the way that people would love to come here and play music. And what's fascinating is the amount of culture that's left Houston, like the people who leave and create away from the city. And it's so rooted in the way we live here, the architecture, the nature, the way we gather, the community, the food, all of that is so alive within us.
And you mentioned, Betty Jean coming from Louisiana. You yourself eventually moved to New York with your daughter, Sophia. Much of the book is dedicated to Houston. What is it like for you to come back to the city now after examining your experiences in this memoir?
I have to tell you, it's so emotional in a way that it wasn't before. Even coming to visit with you, I was driving along Buffalo Bayou, and I got really emotional. And Houston is very much a character in the book. It's got its own flavor, it has its own voice, and it changes. It's hard to come back without my grandmother here, I have to say. It's really hard because it feels like she was the kind of anchor. And so it is hard to come back because I see her everywhere. And there is a bit of grief.
I'm sorry for, your grandmother passing. I lost my grandmother this year, so I understand how that is. In the book, you delve into the stories of Black Panther Fred Hampton's mother, Iberia Hampton, and her relationship to Mamie Till, Emmett Till's mother. There's, stories about Malcolm X's mother, Louise Little. Why was it important to not only tell the story of your family, but also include these stories of these historical figures as well?
I feel like in order to understand my family and even the characters as individuals, we all kind of exist within this context of this nation, and we're all kind of building on what someone left for us, what someone else built, and then we build on top of that. And I do feel there's a way that's present in Black culture. This understanding that you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the people before you. I write about the praying grandmother and how we're each kind of surviving off of those prayers. And I felt like I needed to put it within context because so many people don't know Fred Hampton's mother. A lot of people don't talk about Malcolm X's mother, but these men, these leaders just could not exist without these women who have, who built them up, who loved them. Even when I'm watching the NBA, for example, like every player, when they get their MVP, it's all about their mother. You know, it's their mother, usually a single mother. And so all of these kind of titans who we adore, we have to understand who helped build them.
You mentioned in the book, and it's also a study, the 1965 Department of Labor report written by Daniel Patrick Moynihan that states that single Black mothers or at the time were a significant cause of various societal problems like poverty and crime within the Black community. Your family has several single Black mothers all throughout it, including yourself. How do you feel this report represents your own experience?
The report, it doesn't represent my experience at all, which is why I felt like it was important to write about it. There is a sociologist at Harvard named Sabrina Strings who has been researching to kind of debunk this myth that single motherhood in the Black community is tearing apart the Black community, because it doesn't exist in the same way for the Black community because of the community that's built around these women and these families. So even though I had a single mother, I was with my grandmother, I was with my aunties, I was with the women, my upbringing, and all these women kind of band together in this way that's I took for granted as a child, but is so gorgeous. And so it doesn't, it's a way for, of course, the U.S. government to thwart any type of responsibility for what's happened in this nation in the past and how the Black community ended up in places like Third Ward and Fourth Ward, and how we built these enclaves, but with very little resources. So I felt like it was important to identify that these people who we love and adore and cherish are not the reason for the downfall of our communities. They're actually the reason that our communities are still together.
Throughout the book, there's these themes of like generational traumas that have like carried over from one generation to the next. What does healing look like for communities that you write about? Is water a path back to wholeness or something more complicated?
Yeah, that's such a beautiful question. I think what I hope is that the story like the one that I've told will help to open up more conversations. So many people's grandmothers die and they never get to hear their story because you don't ask Granny about where she came from because you know there's so much hurt there and so much pain, and it's considered disrespectful. But I think that that's actually where the healing is. It's in the talking. It's in the telling of the stories, you know. It's in understanding and growing from each other. It's how we build compassion, not just for our elders and our mothers, but for ourselves. And I hope that with this book, it will create some intergenerational conversations that are so hard to have. I don't think without my grandmother's blessing, my mother would have talked to me in the way she did, or that my aunties would have talked to me. And what was also interesting is when I was talking to all my aunts, and it's 7 of them, they hadn't told each other these stories. So they're learning about each other through reading the book, and they grew up together beside each other, sleeping in the same bed, in the same room, and not even knowing what the other one is processing in their bodies.
And, you know, you yourself, as a mother of Sophia, what has her reaction been to the memoir so far?
You know, she hasn't read it. She's kind of like, you know, she's a kid. She's a teenager. She's 14. She's like, congratulations. I'm so proud of you. I think what's beautiful about this is that she saw me from the beginning. She was with me moving to New York, saying I wanted to study and try to become a writer. And she was beside me, so she understands what went into it. But she probably won't care much until she's older. Right now, all she cares about is listening to music and being with her friends. So she hasn't read it, but I think she understands the impact because of how our family is reacting. She's like, why is everybody kind of upset about this book?
Absolutely. When readers from Houston pick up your book, what do you hope that they recognize about their own lives and their own city in the pages?
I mean, it is my hope and wish that Houstonians see themselves. That would be the ultimate validation of Houstonians saying, yes, that's right. That's what I hope, is that they recognize themselves, they recognize the places, and maybe even see more that something they drive right past every day or walk past and stop and just admire that beauty just for a second longer.
I love that. Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you so much.
Bonet will be at Kindred Stories tonight at 7 to discuss the book. There's more information at today's post at houstonmatters.org. And that does it for this edition of Houston Matters. On tomorrow's show, we'll break down the latest developments in politics in our weekly roundup, and we'll learn one way that commercial landlords are making their spaces stand out to potential renters. I'm Michael Haggerty. Craig's back tomorrow. Join us then for those and other Houston Matters.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Baylor College of Medicine. Through research and innovation, Baylor continues to redefine what's possible in healthcare and medical